We would like to welcome all our dignitaries on the dais with flowers and mementos. Our speakers, Dr. P.K. Mishra, who will be chairing this session, Dr. Upendra Tripathi, Secretary MNRE, Sir David Anthony King, Emeritus Professor in Physical Chemistry, University of Cambridge, and Ms. Hannel Holtinen, Principal Scientist and Research Coordinator, International Energy Agency. Dr. P.K. Mishra is currently the Additional Principal Secretary to Honorable Prime Minister of India. He has rich experience in public service within the government sector and has held several key positions in areas of district and land revenue administration, agriculture and rural development, energy, disaster management, etc.
We'll start. Good morning to you all. I normally would have liked to make certain opening remarks, but that I will make it very, very brief because we already have lost a lot of time. We should have started this session at about 10:30. So half an hour we have lost. So what we will do, that we might continue for 10-15 minutes more than the time on the schedule and reduce the next session also by about 10 minutes or so. I would just briefly mention that when normally as a backdrop we should have discussed certain general issues, but since in the inaugural session the speakers have gone into the whole scenario of power sector in Gujarat and India, and we have that background, all that I would like to say at this stage, that what has come out in the inaugural session is that when we talk about energy for all, sustainable energy for all, which is the main theme of this particular session and the next one also, three aspects have been highlighted this morning. Availability, we need power to be available all over the country. Of course, Gujarat has surplus, but many other states have shortage of power. Then accessibility, it should be accessible to all. People should have access to power in terms of transmission, in terms of distribution and so on. And affordability, that was also focused very much this morning. So keeping these three things in mind, availability, accessibility and affordability, we would like to discuss in this session, of course, aspects of renewable energy. When we talk about renewable energy, of course, as we know, and this was pointed out also, that how to make, when we talk about accessibility, affordability and so on, renewable energy can play an important role, though there are certain issues. For example, harnessing of renewable energy, though we have a lot of potential in the country, and some states in India, particularly Gujarat, Rajasthan for solar, Tamil Nadu and some other states for wind, tremendous potentials are there, but at the same time certain issues are to be addressed. There are commercial issues, technical issues in terms of integration with the grid, and of course we have certain issues of cost also. So all these aspects we need to discuss and address some of these issues. I would like to bring out two things in the context of Gujarat, particularly when, of course, some reference was made this morning when renewable energy, particularly solar energy issue came up 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years, around 2009 and 2010 particularly. Gujarat was the pioneer in the sense that at some point of time, out of say whatever the installed capacity, Gujarat had about 80-90%. Now of course Rajasthan has also gone ahead and Gujarat has about 50-60% of the solar installed capacity in the country. Three things were important. The type of tariff which was fixed, which provided some incentive to the investor. Then tariff which was sustainable in the sense that it was affordable. and of course a confidence in the policy and regulatory system. So some of these factors of course will come up, and of course there are financing issues. And when we talk about renewable energy, we talk about development of new technology, but commercial aspect and technological aspect both are interlinked, in the sense that unless we have the scale, we cannot have incentive to develop technology, we cannot have incentive to invest more, and scale cannot be there unless it is affordable. So one has to strike a balance between the amount or the quantum of incentive one can provide to the investor or those who are developing technology also, and at the same time it becomes affordable, the interest of consumer is also protected. How to strike a balance, that is the most important thing. Many cases in the name of incentive we have gone to such an extent that the power becomes uneconomical, people are not able to buy, and development doesn't take place. On the other hand, if we all talk about cheap power, power which is free, then of course development will not take place. So how to strike that balance? And I am sure that the speakers, who are very, very eminent speakers, they will address some of these issues in the context of renewable energy in the first session, and in the context of energy efficiency in the next session, because both, when we talk about more power, affordable power, the other side is how to save energy, which also can provide a cheaper method of making power available, at the same time can help reduce some of the environmental or adverse effects of climate. We have with us four very, very distinguished speakers. Dr. Upendra Tripathi, who is Secretary, Government of India in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. He will provide an overview, what are the policy, what are the strategy. Of course, the Minister has also dealt with many of those very comprehensively. And I am sure Dr. Tripathi will focus on what are the 2 or 3 key policy measures which will help us developing renewable energy and go in big way in this. Then we have Dr. Hanel Holtinen. She will talk about, she is coordinator of Task 25 on grid integration. She will talk about policy, legal, technical and commercial challenges. In fact, she will, I hope, try to address some of the issues, how to strike a balance between commercial aspect, technological aspect, and also policy regime. Our third speaker, of course, we might slightly change the sequence also. Sir David King will talk about his Foreign Secretary Special Representative for Climate Change, UK. He will talk about the Global Coalition, a reference was made this morning also. Then we have Frank Zhu, Vice President, Energy Holding Group. He will be giving the private sector perspective. So thus we have a combination of policy, private sector, technological issues, and commercial issues also. May I first request Dr. Tripathi to make his presentation. And as all of us know, the time is very, very limited. We thought every speaker will speak about 10 minutes or so, but if they can reduce by a minute or two and save some time, they are most, I think, will be very grateful. Dr. Tripathi.
Dr. Misra, delegates on the diets, and ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I had prepared a very detailed presentation for 15 minutes, but then I find that most of the points have been covered by all the speakers that have come so far. Both, they spoke elaborately on sustainable development and also why upscaling has been done. So I think I will give you something which a bureaucrat can only give. And that is how this change took place. In fact, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in May of this year, we had sent a detailed report saying that this upscaling is not possible. We cannot go for 100,000 solar. And the reasoning was, of course, very easy. We reasoned out in the ministry that we don't have money. The balance sheet for the current year was quite bad. We had some subsidy areas, that is what we have to pay to the various beneficiaries, was around 3,000 crores of Indian rupees, and there was no hope of getting so much of money. Despite a jump in the budget of ours, thanks to the Prime Minister, 67% this year, because we got a whole lot of new schemes. Solar park scheme as a new scheme, where we centralize generation to cut down cost. We got 100,000 solar pumps to help the farmers. We also got a new canal top project, in addition to the off-grid projects we had. But I must tell you the complexity also. I met a vice chancellor from a university close to Delhi. He came and told me, look, I am a votary of renewable power, and we solarize the entire campus. I said, thank you, it's a great thing you did. But he said the problem was, after the complete solarization of the campus, his electricity bill has just doubled. And we tried to find out, and the message reached the cabinet secretary also in the hearing of Upendra. Is it correct that this gentleman solarized the whole campus and his electricity bill has doubled? We found out it was true. And the reason was, they had not put a net meter. It was a gross meter. So it recorded one way, both ways. I mean, the anecdote is that, it's a very complex issue. India is a huge country. Then but this helped us a lot because we could write to the states. And this net metering policy had to be adopted in various states. There is a state regulator. There is a cabinet in the state, because India is a federal country. They have to take a policy decision. And this is just to say that things are not that easy. It is a very complex issue here. And then how did we change the stand of the ministry? Because we had told that it is not possible because we don't have money. And to change it also, you have to find reasons. And I had a very experienced advisor who told me a very good story, and I must share that with you. He told me that a research scholar, he told that a famous company, I think Bata-like company, they wanted to open a improve the rural side. So they wanted a shoes factory, factory in that rural area. So they sent a very good expert who should do a detailed project report for the company, shoes company. This gentleman went and did a thorough analysis, took a statistical survey, and found that 99% of the people were neither using footwear, nor any shoes or chappals or slippers, anything. So the conclusion is very simple. When in an area, 99% of the people are not using this, there is no point producing that there. Somehow the management said, no, they should do a revisit. So another consultant was sent, and he gave the contradictory thing, saying that, look, when 99% of the people are not using it, it means there's a lot of demand. And the demand must be activated. Supply creates its own demand, so please open the factory there. We did precisely that, because on 18th of June, when the new Prime Minister came, secretaries were asked to make a presentation. And they had to be very idealistic. So the reference was, you should speak big, you should think big, you should think bold, and you should think beautiful. That is the 3 yardsticks where your presentation should come. It is not that you give some data and just give some PowerPoint presentations. It must smell, it must mark of bigness, boldness, and beauty. But then there was another set of dimensions also. You have to moderate it. And those 3 were, and it came from the PM, it should have sense of scale, it should have a sense of scale, and speed. Now, if you put these 6, it really makes you a very practical bureaucrat, and which we all became. So we said, yes, 100,000 megawatt is possible, we must upscale, and it is of course yet to go to the cabinet, because we have to have a formal approval for upscaling solar, wind, and all that. But we have got energized because of this. Now, why should we upscale? I was in fact wondering, of course, why we should go to such an extent. The best explanation I got was yesterday when the flight was coming. The person sitting next to me must be a professor. He told me, look, we must promote sustainable development. Sustainable development, although I'm not a doctorate yet, I did a lot of research on sustainable development. I never understood I mean, except the broadband committee reports and all that. He said, look, there are two things you can find out what is sustainable development. One is he referred to Hindu horoscope, mythology, where every individual has got a lifespan of 120 years. That is how the horoscopes are made. Assumption that you will live for 120 years. He said, whatever you live, take that ratio. That is the Sustainable Development Index. It is, 60 years, 80 years, as we progress with average longevity, I think we are becoming more sustainable. That was one way of looking at it. I didn't like it though. And the second thing, of course, he said, sometimes Mahatma Gandhi defined sustainable development. He said, if you take milk out of Mother Earth, you have sustainable development. But if you take blood, you are not. Now I said, what is milk and what is blood? I don't understand that. He said, milk is, solar energy, tidal energy, wind energy. Use as much as you can. And that is the mother's milk. You have wholly sustainable development. But if you take out uranium, coal, fossil fuels, this is blood. That was very clear. So now why upscale are linked to these two anecdotes I told you, or there are three. The one thing is the complexity involved and the empowerment it gives to the university for which it has solarized itself. The shoe factory where the people don't have and they can avail, they can access. And these are the, and the third thing, of course, a general concern that we must promote sustainable development. Within these three things, the ministry has put that solar of 100,000 megawatt, but the question came, can the grid support it? We found that if the grid can't support it, we took out 60,000 megawatt of 100,000 megawatt, where we do not need extra costly grid connectivity. Now, how did we do that? We took 40,000 megawatt for solar rooftops, where actually you don't have very complex new infrastructure to be created. We put 20,000 megawatt under a new scheme called unemployed engineers to be made entrepreneurs. Now, these we linked up to the existing power stations. I'm told there are some 37,066 kilovolt and 33 kilovolt power stations all over the country, where you do not need a lot of connectivity cost. So putting that together, we found if we can get 20,000 unemployed engineers, train them for 6 months, and give them the required financial support and connectivity, the land, etc., they could be made good entrepreneurs. And that doesn't require a lot of smart metering, that doesn't require a lot of creation of energy networks, and some of them can be near the green energy corridor also. Keeping this in view, we could manage this, and that was roughly my 6-minute speech. Thank you.
We welcome Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, Srimati Anandiben Patel, to this seminar on sustainable energy for all. And it is in her august presence that the MOUs will be signed. We invite Mr. L. Chuango, Principal Secretary, and Dr. Kande Yumkhela, Under Secretary General, for the first MOU signing. But before that, we would like to welcome Honorable Chief Minister with flowers and a memento. We also take this opportunity to welcome Honorable Minister Shri Govind Bhai Patel. We invite Honorable Minister Shri Govind Bhai Patel on the dais. We welcome him on the dais. Two MOUs are being signed. One for strategic partnership in energy sector between Government of Gujarat and Sustainable Energy for All of United Nations organizations, between Mr. L. Chuango and Dr. Kande Yumkhela. On the second table, we have an MOU signed for 2000 megawatts imported coal-based power project with Mrs. China Light and Power Limited at Paguthan in Bharuch district between Shri K.H. Choren, OSD EPD, and Shri Rajiv Mishra, Managing Director, Mrs. China Light and Power Limited. We also have an MOU being signed by Srimati Shobna Desai, Additional Secretary EPD, and Shri PPG Sharma, CEO, GSPC Gas Company Limited, for establishing city gas distribution network in 200 villages across the state with GSPC Gas Company Limited, a subsidiary of GSPC. On the other table, we have an MOU being signed between Shri P.L. Panchal, Deputy Secretary EPD, and Shri Asit Patel, General Manager Corporate Affairs TPL, for 51 megawatt solar-based power project with Messrs. Torrent Power Limited, TPL at Charanka Solar Park, District Patan, for meeting with the Renewable Power Purchase Obligations, RPPO, of Messrs. TPL. We congratulate all the parties involved on the signing of these MOUs during Vibrant Gujarat Global Investors Summit 2015 in the august presence of Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, Srimati Anandiben Patel. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all applaud as Honorable Chief Minister leaves the venue. Thank you.
We'll continue now. I thank Dr. Tripathi for his presentation. Our next speaker is Sir David Anthony King.
Colleagues, I'm delighted to be here with you, and you've already had an indicator of what I'm going to be doing. Apparently, I'm going to be launching an initiative that is now called the Gujarat Initiative. I thank Candy Yumkela for giving it a new name. What I am really going to do is take a bird's eye view of the importance of renewable energy for the whole planet. And so in doing this, I'm giving you my title as Practical Paths to Paris. How do we achieve the objectives of staying within that limit of less than 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise that the United Nations, all nations, have committed to? And this is intended to be a contribution to that program at Paris and beyond Paris. The IPCC, the scientific report on climate change, has produced thousands of studies. It's produced an enormous report, and I'm going to extract just one figure from that report. I think it's the most important new figure they've produced. It shows the temperature rise on the vertical scale as a function of time going forward, as a function of cumulative carbon dioxide emissions. And what we see is that we're practically on a linear pathway, that as the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere rise, the temperature is rising virtually linearly. And the extrapolation forward in time is supported by enormous numbers of studies now around the world. So what we can anticipate is that if we want to stay below 2 degrees centigrade, we must put no more coal burning into the world's energy supply system. If we are going to manage this, we can no longer assume that we can continue to burn fossil fuels. So we have to be on a pathway that takes us off this reliance on fossil fuels if we are going to manage the commitment that we have all made. So the objective of my talk, and I believe those that follows, is how do we find a practical pathway to achieve that, and to achieve it cheaply. I accept absolutely the admonition that this is not a good pathway if it isn't going to be an affordable pathway. So let's take a look at what that pathway looks like against business as usual in terms of the billions of tons of carbon dioxide that we are emitting going forward in time per annum. The red pathway is the pathway that we're currently on, and the green pathway is the pathway we need to be on to stay within that agreed limit. Now that's a very dramatic turnaround, and you'll see that the turnaround has to begin now. This isn't something we can put off into future times. The pain in the transition becomes much more difficult if we put this off. So to take us on this green pathway, which let me say right away, I believe is doable with technology, is it doable with political will? I think this has really become a political will issue rather than a technology issue. The energy industry is a $3 to $6 trillion a year industry around the world. It is, of course, by far the biggest industry. And what I'm going to be calling for in this talk is an investment of a fraction of that in a large-scale globalized program of work. And so let me take you on to that point. First of all, a quick word about UK policy. I was heavily involved in developing that policy with Prime Minister Blair when I was Chief Scientific Advisor to him. And basically, we decided that instead of negotiating by saying, we will do this if you do that, we broke that negotiating procedure by saying, we will do what we think is necessary, and then we will discuss this with other governments and hope that others will follow. So we announced very early on, we will be on a pathway to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050. And that is the British pathway. We said this is compared with 1990. Already we're at 29% reduced compared with 1990. By having carbon budgets into the future, we know that we will have reduced our emissions by 52% by 2028. We have carbon budgets already set out to 2028. We're simply setting a pathway for our country that we are hoping will be followed and mimicked by other countries. Now, of course, we began with carbon cap and trading in 2004. This was followed by the European Union. The European Union of 28 countries is now pursuing the same pathway. So what we have is the European Union leading the way in demonstrating that in a developed nation, we can tackle the problem. This was the challenge thrown down in an earlier speech today. We can follow this pathway. We also have a detailed analysis of how we can achieve this and grow our GDP faster. So I just want to emphasize this point, that this transition is not going to be taking place at the expense of the growth of our economy, which is vital to our future. But as we move forward, we also, and I think this is a very important point, recognize exactly the point about the financial difficulties, the economic difficulties faced by other countries in making the transition. And so the first point was a commitment of our government to raise our aid program to 0.7% of GDP. I'm afraid we are the only group of the G8 countries that achieved that. We made that commitment in 2005. We are at 0.7% of our GDP going in aid now. And that amounts to nearly $20 billion a year going in aid from the UK government. Now, we would like to see the other governments rise to that commitment as well. But just to reach the point into the climate issue, we have out of that created an international climate fund, which is now standing at $3.9 billion. Sorry, 3.9 billion pounds. That is more like $7 billion. The International Green Climate Fund, set up through the United Nations process, is now standing at $10 billion. So the British effort is a very significant part of the general process. We are committed to assisting other countries in the process of mitigation, reducing emissions, and adaptation. I just want to emphasize, we feel we are playing our role in that process, and we would like all developed nations to follow that pathway as well. As we move forward in time, of course, we're in the state of the greatest transition the world has seen for a long time. When I say the engine of energy demand growth moves to South Asia, the Asia-Pacific region is becoming the region that will be the powerhouse moving forward through this century. We all recognize that and we all welcome that. And this transition is one that is taking place so rapidly that it's just worth stressing the following. If I define middle-class people as those who spend between $10 and $100 a day, we had 1 billion on the Earth's surface in the year 2000. In 2013, it was 2 billion. 95% of the additional billion middle-class people on the planet's surface are in the Asia-Pacific region. This is the transformation that is taking place. And if we go forward to 2035, you can see energy demand in the other regions of the world being, dwarfed by what is taking place in the Asia-Pacific region. And China and India between them playing the biggest role, of course. I want to stress, this is out to 2035. From 2020, all of the indications are with your government's ambition, and we believe their ambition will be realized. With your government's ambition, it means that by 2020, India will take over as the principal source of growth, of demand for energy, and I would say of growth as a whole. So what you're doing is moving the whole playground, if you like, over to the Asia-Pacific region very strongly and balancing with what China is achieving. Now, what this does mean, if we go forward in time, is that emissions will take off even more drastically in the non-OECD parts of the world as we move forward than in the OECD parts of the world. OECD parts of the world, as shown here, since the arrival of the Kyoto process, are beginning to fall off in CO2 emissions. And the yellow regions indicate the non-OECD contributions to CO2 emissions. We are not going to solve this problem by simply saying it's an old world problem. It's not the OECD problem any longer, it's a shared problem. Historically, yes. But if we're going to manage this problem going forward, we are all in this canoe together. We all have to manage this problem going forward in time. I just want to say, here's the bit going forward to 2035, and you can see what I'm saying. That with this massive new expansion, by 2035, we're expecting the number of middle-class consumers will have risen to 4 billion. That is a fourfold increase in middle-class consumers arising from this remarkable revolution taking place here in the Asia-Pacific region. How are we going to manage that going forward? And I'm simply saying, manage it we must. Now we come to renewable energy. What has Europe done in terms of renewable energy? I'm going to suggest the following. Starting with Germany in 1989, feed-in tariffs were introduced for people to put photovoltaics on their roofs. And they were guaranteed a good price to do this, and so it took off. And that took off across Europe. And this has created a demand for photovoltaics. But look at the unexpected learning curve. This has to be presented on a logarithmic plot. Back in 1976, where this curve starts, the cost of installing photovoltaics was $70 a watt. And you'll see that by the time we get to 2010, the cost has dropped to $2 a watt. It's this big demand created by feed-in tariffs, creating a volume of production that has pulled the price down through competitiveness. And what we're seeing is that that price, by the way, wind has gone down as well. That's the red curve, not as sharply, but both of them beginning to reach that $1 a watt line, which makes it competitive with coal and gas. Now let me just show the data updated with last year's figures. Last year, we can now talk about 2014 as last year, and you see the price still coming down. So we're now reaching into the region of $0.6 a watt, and there's no reason, I believe, why this curve shouldn't keep coming down. We're still relying heavily on silicon-based photovoltaics. Plastic is a possibility that will emerge. That'll bring the price down continually. Moore's law for semiconductors in the IT business is equivalent to Swanson's law here. There's no reason why we shouldn't feed in a big RD&D effort to keep that line coming down, so that we do get to the point where we have democratic energy, if I can quote it in that way. Cheap energy equals democratic energy because it reaches all. Let me just stress, as we go forward in time, however, daylight is not the only time we need electricity. And so we come to this point of intermittency. And that's really the big challenge. How are we going to improve energy storage and smart grids so that we can develop energy from these renewable sources, wind and solar, right through the day and night, right through all seasons? How are we going to do that? We need to focus to target innovation support into those regions which are the gaps to achieving real competitiveness with the fossil fuel business. Now, what I'm saying is this is imperative. If we are going to achieve our objectives to stay below that 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise, we have to take this general challenge on board and see that we create a global effort of research, development, and demonstration to see that we achieve the objectives, remove the gaps to getting to that point. So, here's the proposal. Until now, I've been calling this the Global Apollo Program. I hear that it's now the Gujarat Initiative, so that's fine. The Global Apollo Program, I just point out, the acronym stands for GAP, G-A-P. So we are focusing a sum of money, which we're suggesting needs to be in the region of $15 billion a year, into this program of work, and it would be raised by each country contributing not 2%, not 0.2%, but 0.02% of GDP each year for 10 years into supporting this program. So if we do this over the period 2016 to 2025, we believe we're going to achieve an objective which would be to create renewable energy, 24/7 base load renewable energy with energy storage, with smart grids for all countries in the world, cheaper than it would be from fossil fuels. If we achieve that, even without a carbon price, then we've won the battle. We've won the battle because cheapness is going to be the reason for making the transition. But let me say co-benefits. The co-benefit I'm giving you is not just economic, it's also the CO2 emissions, but also health. Let's not forget that coal is essentially, and I may be having an argument with some people here, a dirty form of energy. I'm afraid we lose many lives each year from coal mining itself. I'm afraid we lose many lives each year from C2.5 particulate matter in the air. So there are co-benefits from shifting on to clean, really clean, renewable energy. It is an indigenous source. It means that we have secure energy sources. There are many, many co-benefits of going down this route. Now what we will do is set up a commission. The commission membership will be determined by the countries that join. The Commission will have a secretariat closely allied with the International Energy Agency, and the secretariat will form a technical committee which will set out a roadmap of what research needs to be done to deal with these gaps going forward in time. So the target, I just repeat, new build renewable energy cheaper. For the sunny parts of the world, we're saying we can get there by 2020. Now, those of you who've been to Britain may know that it's not quite as sunny in Britain as it is here in Gujarat. And so we can't quite rely on solar energy as much as you do. But we do have, as in Gujarat, a lot of wind, and so we are farming wind. We've got more offshore wind than any other country in the world, and we're still extending offshore wind. The same argument applies, by the way. As we enhance our offshore wind capacity, the cost of installation of offshore wind is coming down. And that lowering of cost, as in photovoltaics, is delivering advantages to the whole world. Everyone benefits from the lowering of the cost introduced by feed-in tariffs across Europe, and everyone will benefit as we go into lower cost offshore wind as well. So we believe we can do this for sunny parts of the world by 2020, by 2025, for every country in the world. Nuclear energy, let me stress, will play a role in many countries. That is going to be essential for many northern countries, I believe, and our country is one. But renewables has a much more general application. Now, people say to me, what do you mean by energy storage? Isn't this just either up-pumped hydropower or electric batteries? Well, this is why I like to show this particular slide before I conclude. Why I show this particular slide, because I think it's just a smart idea from a German company. This is up-pumped hydropower, except that the hydropower, you'll see that the water in blue down there is underneath a rock cylinder. So the energy is stored by pumping the rock cylinder up, and then when you need energy, you let it come down and drive the hydropower stations. So it's the same principle, except that you don't have to up-pump 2,000 meters up. You can do this on a flat plane. All right? It's a massive step forward. The dimensions of that, it measures 150 meters diameter, 150 plus meters deep, and that will store about a gigawatt hour of electricity. So we're talking about a billion watt hour storage in this kind of facility. Now, with this, we need to see all of the technology sorted out. The mining capacity is there. We know how to mine around a cylinder like this and cut underneath it. All of that is fine, but we actually need the resources to test this kind of facility at a large scale. So hence the kind of sums of money we're talking about. It's about how we proceed. Heat engines. We've got a British company quite advanced now in developing a heat engine of the kind indicated here. We create the hot store when there's an excess of electricity by pumping gas at high pressure, and then when you want to take electricity out, you use the temperature difference that you've created to drive power. If you want to see, this is what they're building in the UK right now as a test. But again, this kind of thing, to test it, is quite expensive. So I leave you with this. We're proposing this global Apollo program. As a group of us have worked on this for a couple of years. We've been strongly supported by my good friends Kandi and Mahindra at UN Sustainable Energy for All grouping, but we're also getting a lot of interest from around the world. Now is the time to start pushing this in to the point where we begin to create the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir David King, for a very comprehensive presentation. Very, very interesting, starting from the need to reduce the carbon dioxide emission, how renewable energy can help, and also the way the cost is being reduced. I think that gives a lot of hope for development of renewable energy, the cost reduction. And in India also, last 5-6 years, there is similar trend is visible. And after that, of course, some details on the storage, that is very, very interesting. I think this is one area where a lot of work needs to be done. And this is the future for more sustainable development of renewable energy. And of course, this global program for R&D, that is also gives a lot of promises. Thank you again for your presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Frank Ju. He will talk about thin film particularly, which also has a lot of promises.
Thank you.
With the permission of the chair, can I take a minute? Because we have to make an important announcement that as this session proceeds, please send your questions on a note paper and hand it over to our volunteers who will be circulating so that the chair can later on answer them with the help of the panel. You can even email them to amitsaraf@kpmg.com. Thank you and sorry for the interruption, sir.